So that's it. The only thing in the Old Testament that the devil actually does is he kind of messes around with Job's life. That's it. And he's doing it on a bet with God, and he's doing it at God's commandment. So how evil is the devil, really? And then in the New Testament, the only place he appears is, well, he appears in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, but they're all really talking about the same event, which is the temptation of Christ. There are 3 temptations. The first temptation is where the devil, encounters Christ after he's been fasting for 40 days and 40 nights. It's actually kind of redundant. If he's fasting for 40 days, you don't have to say 40 nights. Anyway, he's fasting for 40 days, and Satan comes up to him and says, well, turn these stones to bread. And Jesus says, man does not live by bread alone, which is actually a stupid thing to say because, okay, he may not live by bread alone, but you can live, bread will help. And if you're hungry, why not make some bread? What's the point of starving yourself unless you decide to? And if you're deciding to, you could just say, no, I'm fasting, but thanks anyway. Regardless, Satan just challenges him to make some bread, and then he doesn't. And then Satan takes him to the top of the spire and says, jump off, and God will save you. And he quotes Psalm 91, 11, and 12. But it's not actually clear that that particular psalm, where it says, God will not let you strike your foot against a stone. I read the whole psalm, and it actually seems to just be talking about people who are religious and faithful to God. It doesn't seem to be talking about Jesus at all. It's basically saying, if you're a good person and you live in God's will, God will not let you strike your foot on a stone. So that's not really a direct quote about Jesus. So it's not really written about Jesus, so I'm not sure why Satan's quoting that. But anyway, Jesus responds with, and it is also written that you do not test God. So it's interesting, actually, that Jesus, when put to the test, refuses to actually perform these miracles when he's performing miracles at will in other circumstances. It's almost like somebody who's making promises that they can't back up. When you actually try and challenge them on it, they weasel out of it. That's basically all Jesus is doing, is weaseling out of it, kind of proving he's not actually the Son of God. And the third promise, or the third temptation, is Satan takes Jesus up to the top of the highest mountain, shows him all the kingdoms of the world, remember, and says, all this will be yours if you worship me. And Jesus just says, well, you're supposed to worship God, so no. And that in itself is a ridiculous temptation because, first, if Jesus is truly the Son of God, you couldn't tempt him with anything because he's the Son of God and he knows it. It's like, having a rich kid who's the son of a super rich corporate owner, and somebody who works for that corporation trying to get the kid to work for him, like in his department. It's like, well, my dad's the owner of the company, so piss off. Like, it's a stupid idea. It doesn't make any sense. That's not, you can't tempt the Son of God, or you can't tempt God with some smaller subset of it. It's just ridiculous. So it's a stupid idea. The other thing is, there's no point on earth where you could stand and see all the kingdoms of earth, because earth is a ball. It's a sphere, right? Now, back then, if they thought the world was flat, and actually there's places in the Bible where it certainly seems to be, indicate that they think the world is flat, then maybe you could stand and see all the kingdoms of the world if it's flat. The world's not flat. You can't see all the kingdoms of the world. Obviously, this story is not divinely inspired. So in short, the Bible, or Satan, all he's done directly is just to Job and his family. That's it. Anything else, he's just acting as like a lawyer or a prosecutor, and he's tells David to do the census against the Israelites and accuses Joshua. That's it. This is it. This is the most evil. This is the very embodiment of evil. That's it. That's ridiculous. Come on. I mean, John Milton has a much more interesting Satan than the Satan in the Bible. This guy does nothing. But God, oof. Just the flood alone, Oh, before I get into the flood, the story about Cain and Abel, how Cain murders Abel. if you actually read the story, all that we see is that Cain and Abel decide to give a sacrifice to God. Abel was a rancher, I guess, because he had livestock, and Cain was a vegetable farmer. So when they did their sacrifices, Abel had some young animal that he sacrificed, and Cain had some vegetables. And in the Bible, it actually says that God respected Abel's sacrifice and did not respect Cain's. Cain became jealous and murdered Abel. So God, being omniscient, must have known that being a dick, like what kind of an asshole would do something like that? These are the first two children, right? These are the first two children of his creation. Technically his grandchildren, I guess you could say, and he started showing favoritism, knowing that Cain is going to murder Abel because he's fucking omniscient. And yet, when Cain murders Abel, then God is wondering around going, where's Abel? Well, duh, you knew what was going to happen, you knew what would happen, and then he curses Cain. Like, what the fuck? What kind of a retarded thing is that? That's evil, right? If you know that the results of what you're going to do are going to cause one person to kill another person, technically innocent people, you're just made one man a murderer through your asshole actions. Why not just honor both? What was wrong with an offering of vegetables? Because that's all he had. So he offers all he's got and he gets disrespected. And of course, these are like the first two kids. He's not going to know that murdering his brother is bad, right? So anyway, God was really a dick, a complete asshole right there. And then, you know, in the flood, he murders everyone. And then you've got, in Egypt, he kills all the firstborn. These are fucking babies. They did nothing. And they get all killed. And God hardens the heart of Pharaoh when the Jews wanted to leave. In other words, he impinges on Pharaoh's free will and causes all this extra problems, and then does the plagues, etc. Let's completely ignore the fact that there is no evidence for the Jews ever actually having been in Egypt. That's all just made up. But just going from the story's merits on its own, or the story on its own, God was completely evil because, you know, he's caused all kinds of. If you look through, there's massacre after massacre. There's genocide after genocide. There's even places where God says, kill all the men, take the women and children for yourself, implying sexual slavery. So I would say that the God of the Bible is a horrible, evil creature, and Satan was just like a guy. He didn't really do much. He's not evil at all, really. At worst, he's a bit naughty. You know, betting the devil, or betting God that Job would curse his name. Other than that, devil's not much. So there we go. The God of the Bible is far worse than the devil, responsible for millions and millions of deaths, by the way. Thank you.